Can you add a garden suite, a 2-unit, a triplex, a fourplex, or a fourplex plus a garden suite to your property? Well, in this recording, I'm going to cover how you can determine that using the Toronto Zoning Bylaw interactive map. Hi, my name is Ronald, founder and CEO of Property Pathways, and your missing middle development planner and building permit service expert. Now, if you are looking to find out what's the highest and best use of your property and get the necessary building permits from the building department, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Now, let's jump into this video. So in this video, we're going to look at how to use the map and how you can get the answers that you're seeking. So let's jump into this here. So right now I'm looking at the map. When you go to Google and you type in Toronto Interactive Zoning Map, you should get a hyperlink. That's one of the top results that you get back. And out of those results, you'd be able to select one that would lead you to this map. Now, once you get here, you'll notice that this map actually identifies how the city of Toronto is broken down. You would see some different shades of colors, and we'll jump into how you determine what those colors represent. But this is the map of Toronto and is broken out into all the various cities and municipalities. Now, if you hover over to the very top left of the screen, you'll notice that there's a little small arrow. If it's not already expanded, you should click on it and expand it. Here is where you'll see what all those options actually stand for. So you can see here that there's yellow, which represents residential. There's orange representing residential apartment, green, and so forth. You can see the list here. So these represent all of the things. Now, you can see that institutional is actually expanded. So because institutional is expanded, you can see all the various type of institutional type of uses allowed where this color appears. So going back to the map, so I'll just simply move this over again, just collapse that. You can see that there's a small blue area, light blue area. So why don't we zoom into that area and take a look at, if we click on it, you'll notice that it says IH. That is Institutional Hospital. This is at Finch and 400. Now, if you know this area, you would know that there is a hospital in this little area right off the off-ramp off the highway 400. So you can see that this is actually quite useful, especially when you're trying to determine what's the best use for a property. In this particular recording, what we're going to be looking at is primarily the residential uses and how the residential uses can apply to your property. So why don't we go back to the map here and take a look at how this actually is done. So I would actually just expand by clicking on the residential yellow plus. You see the plus sign right there? Click on that plus sign. You got residential R, residential D, residential S, R, T, R, M. These are all the purely residential. So there's no additional type of uses that are attached to these particular R. So for example, the R represents residential, the RD residential detached, RS residential semi, RT residential townhouse, and RM residential multiple dwelling. And if I were to just simply take a look around any one of these areas, I can probably find a significant amount of those uses as well. So let's take a look at that and see if we can identify. So by simply clicking on the shaded colors on the map, you would actually see an icon that appears. So in this case here, you'll notice that an RD shows up when I select this area. I'm not looking for a specific property. However, I can see that it's telling me that this is an RD. That's what the RD represents. Okay, so I'll just zoom back out and I'll say, okay, how about maybe this area here? This is also an RD. I'll just click around real quickly here. Here you can see there's an RS right in this area. So, or even though they're all a yellow, very certain areas have different type of uses. Toronto is very unique in this standpoint. It does actually carry very specific type of buildings or houses that are allowed in certain zones, even though it's all considered to be residential. Whereas in other cities, what it is you will see is that other cities do have designations such as R1, R2, R3, and within those zones, you can very well put any type of residential, whether it be detached, townhouses, semi-detached, once they meet other parameters of the zoning bylaw. However, Toronto is very specific about the type of buildings that they want within the specific zoning category. Okay, so let's go back to this table and take a look at how this might actually play out. So let's just say we actually had a property that we were looking at. So let's go back here. You can see there we're looking at a property that's in one of these R zones. Well, we might want to also determine not only whether what type of use is actually allowed within that property, but we also want to take a look at whether or not that particular property has any other specific overlays. Overlays are very important when it comes to reviewing Toronto Zoning Bylaw because it covers a lot of additional information such as height overlays, lot coverage overlays, and different policies, whether rooming houses are allowed, and there's parking zones, and there's setback overlays, priority retail, and one of the really important ones is major streets. And I'll tell you why that's important, because it actually does allow for significantly more density, well, hopefully in the near future. So it's really important to know whether you're sitting on a major street. Well, why don't we go ahead and just explore some of those overlays and how they actually work as we select them on the actual property. So you're looking at my screen here. You can see that I am going to zoom in on a specific area. So let's just zoom in on this very same area where it is I initially selected that this here is an RS. So I can see anywhere between here is an RS. Maybe these are all RS semi. However, you can see here, is this an R semi as well? Yeah, this is an RM. You can see right down here, it's an RM. And you can just look at the actual property and you can tell almost if it's a semi, if it's a residential multiple, or if it's a detached, right? So in this area in particular, there's mostly semis. I can see there is some RDs right here. And if you look around, you'll also see that it's actually listed right there, RM, RC, RD, RM, so there's a multitude of different type of residential units that can be within a very small radius, a 5-kilometer radius, for example. That's just how the city has laid out their planning grid and their zoning labels and their uses. So what it is I really want to focus on here is how we can actually take a look at the various overlays. So for example, I'm just going to shrink this in a little bit more here, right? So you can see more of this. So I'm going to uncheck. So let's just look at this area, for example. I'm just going to uncheck the zoning label so you can remove the yellow. And I actually want to just highlight the height overlay. You can see as I select the height overlay, it then actually populates a grid that shows that the height requirement within this area is HT10. You can see that here, right here, HT10. And if you actually click anywhere within that boundary, you'll actually see that there is a dialog box that pops up with actually how much stories is required. 10, and this is 10 meters. So HT meaning height, 10.0 represents meters in terms of units. And ST is referring to stories, and stories is 2. So whichever is lesser, that's how that will be looked at. Okay, so you can see here that this has a height requirement that needs to be met. There may also be a lot requirement. So I'm going to click again. And as you can see, lot coverage pops up here as a tab. And you can see the percentage is 30, meaning only 30% of that lot can be occupied by a building, right? And of course, it would have very specific requirements for garden suites and so forth. And then, of course, there is policy areas. You can see in this area, there's no policy areas because I just unselected lot coverage and I selected policy area, but there seems to be no policy area popping up. But what I will do is I will zoom out and I will uncheck that one more time. I will zoom out as far as I can into the city of Toronto, and then I'll select it again, policy area. You can see there is a green sort of hatch that pops up. These are policy areas, meaning these can be potential areas where there's community improvement plans or business improvement areas and so forth. So those are considered policy areas. And there are other areas where they're doing certain type of studies. So this may also show up in a list like this. Then there may be areas for rooming houses. So you can also check that to see how that applies to your property. Then major streets shows you all the major streets within the city of Toronto. I'm not sure why that's not popping up. That should have populated. Probably have to zoom in some more. So I'll do that one more time. You can see here it's actually populating all the major streets, which is a very important search that most people would be looking for in the near future. And of course, all the other layers relates to other various type of requirements. So this is how you would navigate the actual zoning bylaw to determine what is your zoning for your property. And of course, in future videos, I'll be showing you how you can identify what is the maximum use you can apply to your property and determine what is the next steps in terms of engaging the city to actually get that approved. Okay, I hope you found this video valuable. And if you do, please subscribe, like, and share. And if you leave me a question in there, I respond to all my questions, all questions left for me, and I can certainly help you determine what's the highest and best use for your property in the city of Toronto.